Is the Mets president of baseball operations, David Stearns, feeling the pressure to bring Kyle Tucker to Queens? Reports indicate they've offered Tucker a massive $50 million AAV over 3 years. Y'all know I love talking Mets baseball with Tyler Ward, so let's bring my guy in. Tyler, what's going on, man?
Brandon, Happy New Year. How are you?
All's well. I feel even better if they can land Cal Tucker. We've seen the reports that Stearns isn't offering him a long-term contract. In fact, he's not offering long-term contracts to any players that are nearing 30. Players want that stability and that guarantee, hence why Pete Alonso is in Baltimore. The Blue Jays are reportedly offering Cal Tucker a long-term deal. So do you think that Stearns is going to have to play a little ball and go up in years to land Tucker? And would he be worth Stearns going against his own process?
Oh, great question, Brandon, because we actually have some breaking news that dropped right before we started recording here. So it's a perfect way for me to announce it. Jim Duquette of SNY did relay that it's very likely that they've already went 4 years now for Kyle Tucker. And I came out with a piece very early this morning on my platform breaking down how they're very well at 4 years, 200 million now. So absolutely, to answer your question, yes, they can't stop at 3 years, 150, because as much as that is an absurd average annual value of a contract, and for context, Brandon, $50 million a year is $1 million less than what Juan Soto makes with his base salary a season. So this is big money spending we're talking right now. But in order to pry Tucker away from both the Blue Jays and the Dodgers, especially, are lurking for that short-term high AV offer, the Mets and David Stearns must be diligent and be adamant that they not only want Tucker, but they continue to reaffirm that they're going to do everything that they possibly can to land him. Now, obviously, the big question is will Tucker have an appetite to take a shorter term contract? And that's something that we don't really have an answer to as of the time of us talking. But when we can compare and contrast what the Mets have done versus what the Blue Jays have done, it really is going to come down to, I think, the most immediate money, as well as obviously what Tucker is going to be most comfortable with heading into the 2026 season.
Let's talk about him on the defensive side of the ball. Juan Soto is already playing right field, so it's more than likely that Tucker's going to move over to left. Do you think that he can play at a Golden Glove level in left field the way that he did in right?
Yeah, it's interesting because Tucker has fluctuated quite a bit with his defensive value in his career. He's had some really good years in Houston where he's looked like an absolutely superb talent, like a truly five-tool talent. Then we've seen years, including this past season, where the defense took a bit of a hit, but it's also bearing in mind he was adjusting to Wrigley Field for the first time in his career for half a season and also dealt with ailment towards the end of said season. So I think Tucker's defense is going to be fine, to simply put. I think that there's going to be a greater ceiling in what you're getting than, say, what you previously had in Brandon Nimmo. And I also wouldn't be surprised if the Mets get very creative on how they go about the configuration, because Kyle Tucker on paper right now, as we know, is obviously a better defender than Juan Soto. Juan Soto is arguably the worst defensive right fielder in baseball. So naturally, it wouldn't make a level of sense if the Mets actually, if they do land Kyle Tucker, maybe shift him to right, give Soto some reps and left, whether that's consistent or something that they just kind of alternate throughout the season, because Soto is, in fact, going to be playing left field for Team Dominican Republic in the upcoming World Baseball Classic. So to be determined to see how the Mets defensive configuration will be. But do I think the Mets would be essentially signing Tucker as a liability defensively? No, I do not. I think he still has the potential to be at minimum an average defender and at maximum that Gold Glove caliber guy again that we hopefully will see in the coming
Let's
years.
flip it to the offensive side, because if you pair these two up, you have arguably the most disciplined and dangerous lefty duo in baseball history. But would this be a better duo offensively than Soto and Pete Alonso?
Great question as well. And from an offensive standpoint, you can make the argument no, in the sense of Pete Alonso is the guy that's going to be notorious for driving in the most runs, hitting the most home runs, and it's really, really hard to find a proper replacement. But I think when looking at plate approach in particular and discipline, without a doubt, the Mets would be upgrading in that regard, because Kyle Tucker and Juan Soto are two of the best eyes in all Major League Baseball. And the idea of them batting back to back in the lineup together would do absurd damage to opposing pitching because we all know how elite Soto is, doing his little shuffle, shaking his little butt out there. But Tucker, without a shuffle, still has a very elite eye at the plate and approaches his game very similarly to how Juan Soto does. So there is no denying that should the Mets bring this duo together, two of the best outfielders in baseball from an offensive standpoint, the two biggest free agents that have hit the market each of the past 2 years from an outfield standpoint. And while we love Pete Alonso, Kyle Tucker is undoubtedly the better overall player and is a guy that I think would help steer the Mets in a winning direction, as he obviously knows a thing or two about winning championships during his time there in Houston.
I love how you said, should they bring this duo together? I feel like there's a lot of pressure on David Stearns to bring this duo together, coming off that disappointing 83-win season, and it's been a pretty quiet winter so far. There are a lot of fans, as you know, Wardy, that feel like he's moving backward while the Dodgers continue to stack up stars. So in your opinion, does David Stearns have to sign Kyle Tucker to maintain his credibility as the man who can build a championship-like roster, or can he actually afford to walk away if the bidding war with the Blue Jays gets a little bit too high?
I'm going to be completely honest by saying I do think he can afford to walk away, and here's why. If Kyle Tucker gets a long-term contract from the Toronto Blue Jays worth of 10 years with absurd commitment, you can only fault the Mets so much for not wanting to go there when they already have their own rightful long-term commitment to Juan Soto and one corner outfield as is. I understand the David Stearns philosophy by being deterred from long-term contracts for guys that are getting close to 30, and Kyle Tucker's a unique one because he's turning 29 this Saturday, and he's someone that we expect to give you a lot of value, but you're more than likely going to get the best value out of him over the next 5 years. So should the Mets do everything in their power to land Tucker? Absolutely. That's what they're doing right now. It isn't for a lack of effort. If the Mets don't land Tucker, do I think that that'll make it a massive failure of an offseason for the Mets? Not necessarily. However, it does make it a lot less likely that the Mets are going to be able to put out a product on paper that we know currently that's going to have Mets fans satisfied heading into next season. Every Mets fan and their mother, for the most part, that I've talked to is more than content with Pete Alonso leaving if Kyle Tucker is essentially our consolation prize or the reason as to why we allowed Alonso to walk all this time. If that is in fact the route the Mets go down and actually prevail in the end, then a lot of Mets fans are going to be happy. But if they do not land with him, there are very few options out there that I think will satisfy fans, not to the same degree as Tucker, but at least have us feeling like, okay, we have a good roster heading into next season. I'm cautiously optimistic. So that's where I kind of feel at this point in time regarding that.
Well, who are some of those names that could be the consolation prize if they don't get Tucker?
Cody Bellinger, without a doubt. And I think it's really the writing on the wall that the Mets are going to land one of these players in the end. Take it with a grain of salt. I said the exact same thing about Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz, and neither of them are New York Mets right now. But knowing that Cody Bellinger is a Scott Boras client, for those that don't know, Steve Cohen has spent more money on Scott Boras clients than any other ownership group in baseball since he became owner 5 years ago. They have a very good rapport and relationship together. And Cody Bellinger has everything that the Mets want in a player. And the only reason, truthfully, that I believe that the Mets may not land Bellinger is because they know the ceiling with Tucker is greater from an offensive and potentially a leadership standpoint. But Bellinger is a tremendous clubhouse character. He's been a winner everywhere he's been, from LA to Chicago to now New York. And that emphasis on New York really rings true here because David Stearns wants guys that can handle big markets that have shown success. And that's why you're seeing the continuation, the Mets prying a lot of these former Yankees to Queens. It has so much less to do about them being a Yankee as it has so much more to do about them handling the New York market. I cannot emphasize that enough. So Cody Bellinger, undoubtedly, I would say, is at the tippy top of the list should Kyle Tucker make his decision beforehand. And everything that we're seeing right now is suggesting that Tucker is going to make his decision as soon as this week, where Cody Bellinger will probably be the next man up as soon as that domino finally falls.
Clock's ticking. Pitchers and catchers report to Port St. Lucie in under a month. Baseball's right around the corner. Wardy, I'm sure we're going to be coming back to you soon, my man. Thanks for hopping on with us.
Thanks so much, Brandon. Have a great one.